behavior is information. Behavior is information that we as professional educators can use to fine-tune our instruction. In this episode, I'll be answering a burning question sent in by a listener just like you. Now, this is the number one question I have received from many teachers all around the world who attended my Creating Calm Classrooms webinar or my recent session at the Soar to Success Summit. And that question is, I like the reasons for using a calm down area in my classroom, and I gave it a try. Good for you, listener. But it didn't work. What am I doing wrong? And then this same teacher goes on to say, it was a distraction for the other kids. And the one child in particular who was most often there liked it so much that he didn't want to leave. So this is an excellent question. I'm going to break it down for you. So tip number one for this teacher is to understand the true purpose of a calm down corner or whatever you call it. It could be a calming area. It could be a Zen zone. I learned that from Amy Dean. It could be a safe spot. It could be any number of things that you want to call it. But the purpose of that area is to provide our students with tools that they can use to develop self-regulation skills. They need to learn how to begin to regulate their feelings and emotions because they don't know how because they're too young, right? Tools, they don't work if we think of them as cures for behavior. Did you get that one? Tools don't work if we think of them as cures for behavior because behaviors are symptoms, right? So a calm down corner or safe spot or Zen zone, whatever you call it, does not cure behaviors because it's not a magic pill, right? I wish there was a magic pill for behaviors in the classroom. I wish there was a magic pill for calming kids, but that's just not how it works, right? So here's an example from my own life. So my mom, she had terrible migraines. They started kind of later in life for her, but they were super debilitating. And I'm sure many of you out there have experienced something similar. These migraines put her right in bed. She couldn't have any light. She had to keep the windows covered. She had to keep a cloth over her eyes. They made her very sick to her stomach. And they would really lay her up in bed for, at least 24 hours, if not more. It was very troubling. And of course, what happened when she went to the doctor? They prescribed her a bunch of meds. And sometimes the side effects from those meds was even worse than the actual migraine, right? So what they didn't do was find out what was causing the migraines. So they were just treating the symptoms, right? And eventually she developed a bleeding ulcer from all these meds they were giving her, when it really turned out in the end that she was allergic to chocolate, which is probably a death sentence for many people out there. But once she eliminated chocolate from her diet, the migraines subsided considerably, right? Now, sometimes there's chocolate hiding in certain things and she eats them, then she gets sick. But sometimes you have things or ingredients that you don't know are in certain foods. And so anyway, now that we know that she has an allergy to chocolate, the way we treat her migraines now, or way we approach the migraines, is that we don't eat the chocolate, right? So do you see how those pills they gave her didn't work, right? And if we are just trying to treat behavior and treat those symptoms of behavior by using tools like sensory bottles and squishy toys and all that good stuff, instead of diagnosing the real problem, then the tools won't work. Okay, so what does that look like, Vanessa, right? I know you're out there wondering, okay, great. That's great to know, but what do I do? So, for example, you have a child who's uncontrollably crying, right? I'm sure you've all out there experienced this. A child who is just inconsolable, just absolutely hysterical. You can approach that child and you can say, right? And we learned this at the Soar to Success Summit too. You can say, I see your face is red and you're crying. You look very sad, right? Then you might offer a suggestion, something like, you know what I like to do when I'm sad? I like to hug my favorite stuffed teddy bear really tight, like this. And I have some stuffed animals over here in the calm down corner or Zen zone or whatever you call it. Would you like to hug one of those too? Now that's just one way, because we all know you'll have a child eventually, if you haven't already, who looks at you right in the eye and says no, very emphatically. And you have a couple choices here. You can turn around, walk away and go, I don't know what to do. Or you can try something else. You might say, if the child looks you in the eye and says emphatically no, well, you might say this, okay, well, the stuffed animals or whatever you have are right here if you need them. And you might walk away at that point, if you think that's a good jumping off place. Or you can offer another suggestion. You could say something like, that's okay. Not everybody likes the same thing. And then you can offer another tool, one that they're familiar with, right? Because we don't offer tools to children before we've taught them and introduced them and shown them how to use them. That's foreshadowing. We're going to get to that. And another thing I might say is something like this. You know what some of the other kids that I work with like to do when they're feeling sad like you? And then I might offer another tool that the child is familiar with. So let's say you have 2 tools in your calming area or Zen zone, whatever you call it. Maybe you have some stuffed animals or some soft, squishy things, and you have some sensory bottles, right? So then I would move on to the other thing and I would demonstrate again how to use that. If the child is crying because they're angry, they might throw the bottle. Yes, that is true, because that behavior is a symptom of something, right? Just remember, tools are not magic. Now, tip number 2 is to never, ever, ever put anything in your calming area that you have not introduced and used with your whole class, right? Because they need to see you demonstrate how to use the tools. They need to use the tools with your guidance and support after they've been introduced. So showing them how to do something is not as effective as then showing them how to do something and then inviting them to do it on their own, right? And I like to think about that in my own life. Whenever my husband tells me how to do something on the computer, it's really never effective unless I can sit down and do it with his guidance and support. And I'm sure some of you can relate to those tech challenges. Then and only then, after you have introduced it to your whole class, right? And then demonstrated how to use it and then invited them to use it along with you with your guidance and support, then and only then does a tool get put into the calming area for what we call independent practice. So I would not offer that child who was having a meltdown any tool that we had not already introduced. Now, tip number 3 is less is more. And I know, we say that all the time in education, but in this case, it is so very true. Just a few tools can go a long way. It's better to have like just 2 tools that your kids are really familiar with than to have a whole bunch and then have kids like wanting to go there all the time because it's so fun and exciting. It's really better to have just a few. Another thing to remember about using tools in your calming area is that they work differently with different children. So before the tools can work, we first have to have a connection with the child. And then we have to begin to investigate the cause of the behavior. Then and only then, once we pinpoint the cause, can we start working on a solution. And now, as long as we're on the topic of calm down corners, here is another good question from another loyal listener. So this listener says, last year I had several students who would disrupt the class by running, chasing, and calling out to each other during group time. Nothing I did helped, and I had a hard time handling these behaviors. Would you suggest referring a student to the calm down area for this? First of all, excellent question. Excellent question. Just because you asked that question shows me that you're a professional educator because you're seeking out solutions to problems that you have in the classroom. So bravo to you, listener. So my response to that is that behavior is information. Behavior is information that we as professional educators can use to fine-tune our instruction. So the first thing you need to do is ask yourself a few questions. Like, when do they run and chase each other the most? Is it during transition time? Is it during cleanup time? And once you pinpoint when these behaviors occur most often, then you're going to ask yourself, what were you doing when that behavior was happening? And what was your reaction to this behavior? And next, what can you do differently to create a different outcome? And I know this is putting it a lot back on the teacher, but this is part of being a reflective educator, right? We must reflect on what happens in the classroom in order to solve the problem, right? We have to reflect on it and then look at what our response to the behavior was, right? And then we can fix or improve our instruction to get a different outcome. Okay? What can you do differently to create a different outcome? So, for example, let's take cleanup time, because that's a time that I think we can all agree on can be difficult, right? In the early childhood classroom. So let's say the children were having or displaying these behaviors during cleanup time, right? They're running and chasing and being loud and shouting. So let's first ask ourselves, what should they be doing after they're done cleaning up? Do they know where to go? That's the first thing I would ask. Then, do they know how long they have to clean up? Is the cleanup time too long or is it too short? Because that can also play a big role. The next thing I would do is revisit the rules and routines for cleanup time. You do have rules and routines for cleanup in your classroom, right? If not, that's probably one of the key causes there. So revisit the rules and routines. What does cleanup look like and what does cleanup sound like? It is never, ever too late to revisit rules and routines for anything in your classroom. The minute you see or hear a problem occurring, that's when you stop and revisit the rules and routines. The next thing is give positive reinforcement for the children that you saw that were actually following those rules and routines for cleanup time. Like, oh, I can tell that we're cleaning up because I see Leticia over on the carpet. She's finished and she's sitting and she's ready to listen. Oh, and I see Juan over in the block center and he is putting blocks in the bucket. I can tell that these children are cleaning up, something like that, some positive reinforcement. And then practice. Are the children able to practice the rules and routines that you've set out? So you can revisit those with them, but then you're going to want to invite them to practice with your guidance and support so that you can be there to scaffold for success, right? We want to set our kids up for success. So we're going to revisit those rules and routines, right? We're going to model. And then we want to allow them to practice what we just revisited, right? Even if it's April or May, it doesn't matter, right? They're little kids. They don't really know, quote unquote, know anything 100% at that age. Even kids who have been potty trained can regress, right? So think about it that way. And just remember, behaviors are just symptoms of a problem. If we figure out what the problem is, then we can start working on the solution. And quite often, the solution to a problem in our classroom is going to be to make changes to what we're doing or how we're doing it and how we're responding to it to set our kids up for success. So, in short answer to the listener's question, I would not suggest the child visit the Calm Down Corner for these behaviors because these behaviors are normal behaviors for young children. And to be honest, a solution cannot be reached by visiting the Calm Down area. Remember, it's not a magic pill. The solution is for us as teachers to be responsive to what our students' behavior is telling us. And that is what I want you, the listener, to take away from this episode. So when it comes to behavior, our goal as professional educators is not to get our students to comply. I often get questions about that too. How do I get my students to comply? And our job as teachers is not to get compliance or to expect compliance for our students. Our job as professional educators is to help our students learn how to self-regulate their feelings and emotions by providing them with the time, the tools, and the practice they need. Now, let me show you here on the screen. We do have a blog post at Pre-K Pages. So if you want to know a little bit more, get some ideas or information about what a calming area or whatever you want to call it looks like, you can go to the blog and you can see that blog post here. And the title of that blog post is How to Set Up a Cozy Corner in Preschool. That's another name that you can use as well. So there's information there for you as well. Another resource we have for you over at Pre-K Pages is our Feelings and Emotions Calming Techniques Kit. And in there, you can get some ideas for other tools and techniques that you can use to help your children begin to self-regulate. So thank you to all of our listeners out there who sent in their questions. I can't wait to read more right here on the podcast. Until next time, I'm Vanessa Levin. Onward and upward.